Good evening. Welcome to the fifth session of our campaign training series. This session is on communication and messaging. So far, the first four sessions, we've talked about what first-time candidate should consider when running for office. We've talked about the roles of field managers and volunteer managers, and then campaign managers, and of course fundraising. So what have we talked about? Why should a candidate run? How do they operate a campaign and how do they raise money? How do they form an operation to get their message out? Today we're actually going to talk about that message. How do you form the message and how do you make the message a commodity that your campaign staff can then push out to the public? I'm so happy to have with us as our moderator this evening a great Democrat and a good friend, Keith Ribnick.
Thank you, Matt, and good evening, everybody. A couple of quick announcements before we actually get started. If anyone has questions this evening, you can use the Q&A feature, and we will answer the questions after the presentation. This will allow us to capture your questions before the Q&A segment. We will send you a copy of tonight's presentation via email in the next few days. And finally, if anyone has questions that are not covered by the webinar, they can email Matt at chair@in4blue.com. All right, that's it for announcements. So I'm absolutely delighted to introduce tonight's presenter, Margaret. Margaret is a new member of the Plainfield School Board. She ran for elected office for the first time in the fall of 2024 and took her seat on the school board in January. Prior to running for office, Margaret practiced law for 13 years, then stayed home with her kids and got really involved in the school system. She decided to use her passion for children and education to advocate for a more inclusive environment for all students by running for her local school board. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Margaret. We're so glad you could join us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keith, for that introduction. Well, we have a lot to cover tonight, so let's jump right in. Okay, we're going to get the PowerPoint presentation, and let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, our agenda, very briefly, we're going to discuss internal versus external communication, communicating with your team, crafting your core message, communicating with voters, engaging with the community, organizing community events, and final tips and takeaways. Next slide. All right, internal communication occurs within your campaign team and among your volunteers. So that is probably fairly obvious, but the internal communication is what's going to keep you organized, to keep your campaign working together and everybody knowing what to expect. So that's the internal part. And then the external communication is everything that takes place when we reach out to potential voters. Next slide. All right, we'll keep going for the next slide there. And starting with our internal communication, I believe there we go. We're going to talk about initial considerations. All right, so our goal here is to develop a strong personal brand. The candidate is the brand. So first thing I would recommend is scrubbing your social media presence right away. Anything that might be controversial or just not helpful, go ahead and take that down. You're going to want to create a campaign email address separate from your regular email address. Assemble your communication team. So that team could look very different for different people. I'm just going to mention a few people that you may have or roles that you may have, but you do not need all of these. Some of those would be a communications manager, a press manager, that would be only for larger campaigns, social media manager, web designer, a photographer possibly, and an event coordinator. Don't forget that one person can wear multiple hats. So In my campaign, when I ran for school board, I really had two key women who were at my side all the time, who stuck with me through the whole campaign. They were really everything. And then we had a kind of a larger group of women who were more casual supporters and did help us get out in the field. But I had mainly two people on my team. Okay. Then you're going to want to, oh, just a note about your team. Recruit team members of various ages and skills so that obviously if one person's not strong in one area, someone else can take care of that. All right, you're going to want to identify the issues that are important to you and relevant to your target market. Then frame the key issues into a clear message. And finally, you're going to plan how you'll get the message out to the public. Next slide. Okay, so we have some tools we can work with within the campaign. One idea would be a project management plan. This is just a document that's going to explain how everything is going to operate, who carries, who's doing what, who's responsible, kind of a timeline. It's going to show a procedure on how the team will manage the project and meet your objectives. Now that's optional. I did not use that, but if that's something that could be helpful, you could do that. Obviously, you're going to be using emails, texts, phone calls within the team. You're going to have team meetings, whether that's in person or virtual. You may create a private Facebook group. Just be aware that anything digital can be hacked. So if there's anything really, really sensitive, I would recommend picking up the phone, making a phone call, or even just meeting in person. Be very careful what you're putting on paper and on the internet. Okay, other applications you could use are Slack, Hustle, WhatsApp, Signal, etc. Those are also peer-to-peer texting apps that can be used to converse between the candidate and the team. AI can also be a very powerful tool, saving you time. Just decide on some parameters. For example, what are some things that you're going to use AI for? What are other things you don't want to use it for? Who's using it within your campaign team? Are they telling the candidate which things they created with AI, just so you're aware? And then finally, if other people, excuse me, from outside the campaign ask you about whether you've used AI, just be prepared to speak to that honestly. So again, that's where you just want to decide what you feel is appropriate to use AI for. Okay. And then finally, just your team will decide on the tools that they feel most comfortable using. So you don't need everything, just find what works best for you. Next slide. Internal training. So when you're first getting started and assembling your team, you may want to have some training that could go a long way. The first thing is on the VAN. That's the Voter Activation Network, just referred to as VAN. That's a privately owned company that provides a voter database and services to the Democratic Party, Democratic candidates, and nonprofits. It is a paid subscription, but you can talk to your county chair, your state chair, anyone who is a formal part of the Democratic Party, and they can give you access to that. So what does the VAN do? It allows you to search your geographic area for data about potential voters. So you can add filters in there to find out, for example, you may search parameters such as age, sex, race, income level, things like that. Or you may want to look at a score. The VAN will give voters a score to try to determine whether they're likely Democrat or a likely Republican. That is based on who they voted for in a primary. However, just be aware that's not always perfect. Sometimes people will vote in the other party's primary for strategic reasons. So that is something that you can look at, but know that it's not perfect. Okay, the VAN also provides tools such as contact management, phone banking, event management, email marketing, fundraising, and more. There are other apps out there, but the VAN is a great place to start. Okay, what is GOTV? That means get out the vote. So we'll talk about the message in just a minute here, but about 30 days prior to your election, you're going to start shifting your messages to getting out the vote. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, and keep moving to the next one. We're going to talk now about our external communication. Crafting your message. Okay, this is our kind of the key point of why we're here tonight. So before you actually start writing a message or thinking about your message, you need to gather some information and make some assessments. You need to study the office you are running for, find out the scope and the duties of that office, and just as important, you need to know what is not part of your office. A good idea would be to attend the meetings, whether in person or virtual, to understand the position, the relevant issues, and talk to the people who've held the position. Likely, people are going to ask you if you've attended the meetings. So in my case, school board, people said, do you usually attend the school board meetings? And because I was prepared, I could confidently say, yes, I've either attended or watched them online every meeting in the past year. Okay. This will also help you. Oh, okay. Moving on. Let's research your target audience, including the demographics, as I mentioned before. So you want to know who it is that you want to target your message to. Investigate the issues that resonate with your constituents and learn about recent or historical events in your community that may be top of mind for voters. So, for example, God forbid, let's say in a school setting, you had a safety concern, and that may be incredibly important. Of course, you're going to need to tailor your message about school safety, but there could be lots of other issues happening in the community, and you'll need to know what those are. Okay, one other idea, you might create a survey of the issues that are most important to your voters. You could do this using tools on social media or with the van. Okay, so now we're going to talk about crafting narratives that are relevant, memorable, and transcend party lines. So a couple ideas here. Using personal stories really helps create an emotional connection with the audience. For example, telling a story about yourself, your family, a friend, or a neighbor. You might want to talk about relatable struggles that you've faced and how that motivated you to run for office. So we want the people we're talking to realize that we really are just like them. Emotional, similarly here, emotional connections, they help the message resonate. It can really, someone really feels what you're talking about. They're going to want to support you. Anecdotes can be great ways to illustrate key points and again, make it more relatable and memorable. And finally, you might use humor. Humor can help break the ice, create a relaxed atmosphere. It's okay to have a little levity here. Sometimes these things get pretty serious. So we can use a little humor. Just make sure that you can pull it off. I'm not great with humor, so I did not use that in my campaign. But if that's a natural part of your personality, go ahead and do that. We just want to make sure we're not offending anybody with any offensive jokes. All right, now let's talk about our platform issues. So these are the issues that we have already identified are important to our voters. So you're going to want to limit it to about 3 main issues or priorities. It could be 2. So that's going to help you stay focused. Do not overpromise. Be clear about which issues are within the scope of your position. Avoid divisive or emotional issues, for example, abortion, if it is not part of your job. You want to be prepared to give a short and honest statement because people are going to want to know anyway. Even if you're saying that's not part of my job, some people are going to press you and say, well, I know, but I want to know how you feel. So that's where you want to be prepared to give an honest statement about state and federal issues. Don't get derailed. You want to make a short statement and then steer the conversation back to your core issues. So an example, as a county council member, I would not be making decisions about abortion access. Now, if the person you're speaking with just keeps pressing you and saying, well, I just need to know how you feel about that, you could say something like, I support a woman's right to self-governance and privacy, but again, my views would not come into play in that position. Next slide. All right. Once we have our issues identified, we're going to create a stump speech, and the platform is going to discuss the issues. So the stump speech is simply your speech that you're going to have ready, and you can use it in many different settings. It might be really casual. It could be a more formal speech, but it's going to have the same core elements. You can use that to introduce yourself, who you are, how long you've lived in the community, and your relevant experience. You can tell voters why you're running for the office, identify your core issues that you seek to address. That is your platform, the issues. You would like to distinguish yourself from your opponents, highlight unique qualifications and plans. Those elements above are going to be the core of your message, and they're going to inform everything else that we say to the voters. So you want to get really clear on introducing yourself, what you think is relevant, and the issues. Okay. You want to avoid complex language or jargon to make the message more accessible to the widest range of people. And a really good idea is writing it all down at the beginning of your campaign, because this is going to force you to think through everything up front. The core elements, again, we want to have them consistent. We don't want them changing. So I think I mentioned in the slide about a project management plan or a case management plan. I did not do that. But what I did is I created the website. It was one of the very first things I did. And that forced me to really fine tune my message because it was going to be in writing. And I worked with my two key teammates, and they really poured over that. And it helped me think about all the issues, the questions that were going to come up, and what parts of my background I wanted and experience I wanted to highlight. So I kind of wrote it all out in my website. Then it became much, much easier. Everything else I did flowed from that because I already knew what my message was. Okay, so here we go with, these are just names for brief summaries of what we want to talk about. So the elevator pitch, you probably have heard that. That's about a 30-second self-introduction. Who you are, how long you've been in the community, your qualifications, the office you're running for, and the core issues. So 30 seconds goes by really, really fast. You need to practice a very succinct elevator pitch. You may only have 30 seconds to speak with somebody, and you want to get your core message out. So it's maybe 3 or 4 sentences. All right. And then if you have longer, you can go into what we're calling the escalator pitch. That might be about 90 seconds or 2 or 3 minutes. So hopefully, after you got through your elevator pitch, the person asked you a question. They wanted to know more information about you or your issues or positions. Perfect. So now you can go into depth. Thank them for asking the question, being an engaged citizen, respond to their questions, and this will give you the chance to dive deeper into specific issues. Be sincere in your statements. Invite the listener to follow you on social media, visit your website, come to your events, or donate to your campaign. What you want to end with is a call to action on the part of the listener. So let's go to the next slide. Perfect. And we're going to talk about the call to action. This is going to urge the listener to take a particular action, such as contacting their representative. In this case, that would be more general. In this case, we want them to donate to the campaign, come to another event, volunteer, and ultimately vote for you. It encourages the public to identify with you and your message. It's going to guide them to take that next step, whether it's learning more about you or actively jumping right in to get involved in your campaign. Without a clear call to action, we run the risk that people don't really know what to do next or just simply forget and move on. We know people are busy. We want to make it really clear and easy for them to and tell them what we'd like them to do next. Okay, this is going to create a sense of urgency and give the listener that clear call. Don't feel bad about asking for a donation. This is a tough one. I know. I initially felt awkward as well, but it is an important part of the campaign. And if the listener has voiced support for you, and particularly you resonate on an issue that you can both really are passionate and you've talked a lot about, explain to them that to get you elected, to be able to advocate for them and for the issue that they feel is important, it costs money. So ask them if they'd be willing to make a small donation or an ongoing donation. Just go ahead and ask the question. It can't hurt. Next slide, please. All right, timing is everything. So President Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address in 2.5 minutes. That is really, really quick. And we still remember it and talk about it to this day. Most of us, including myself, take much longer to speak publicly. So you want to, with that core message, once you've developed your message and practiced it, prepare a 5, 10, or 15-minute version of it. of course, this is just examples. It can be any length, but people usually stop listening after about 8 minutes. So you want to get to your point. Ask your team to time you, give feedback, and ask really hard follow-up questions. You want your team grilling you and getting practice responding in a friendly environment before you go out in public. You should be prepared to go deeper on the issues that you have identified. The ones you're running on, you really need to get into the nitty-gritty, because hopefully people will ask you more about them, and then you can showcase your knowledge and your plan. So practice, practice, practice. That'll help you be more confident, credible, and able to connect with your audience. Just a little fun fact about Lincoln is that he ran 6 times before he was elected. Okay, let's talk about navigating a Q&A session. And let me just mention at this point that maybe you think some people are born great communicators and other people are not. That is not true. Research shows that communication is a skill that can be learned and fine-tuned by anyone. It is simply a matter of practicing. That's where your team will come in. They can give you pointers. If you know someone who is a great speaker, ask them for some help. Okay, so when we get to our Q&A, 1, you want to know your material in advance. 2, you've prepared already, attended the relevant meetings and spoken with key players. So that way you can, number 3 here, anticipate common questions. Rehearse your responses. Be honest and sincere. Thank the audience for the questions. Now, you may refuse to answer a question if you feel it's inappropriate. So you could say, I'm sorry, that question is inappropriate and I'm not going to answer that. Let's move on. Something like that. You can say, I'm not going to justify that with a response. Let's get back on track to something that is more appropriate. Things like that. But again, you sort of need to prepare that. And if you are in potentially hostile territory, like a debate, you might need to do that. In very rare cases, you can express outrage. If something is so inappropriate, highly offensive, you can call the person out and then just try to move on and not get too emotional, get right back to your message if you can. All right, so how on the right side of this slide, how can you maintain composure during the Q&A to project confidence and authority? 1, try to stay calm. The best way to do that is taking some deep breaths. If you need to pause, that is perfectly fine. So we want to actively listen while they are asking the question. Then pause, think about your answer, and then go ahead and answer. While the person is asking your question, maintain eye contact with them. Then when they're done, you're pausing and reflecting, you can start to look around the room or even at the back of the room. You want to draw everybody in that's in the room. All right, well, let's move on to speaking impact. All right, we want to aim for a clear message that resonates with the experiences, values, and emotions of those listening. Learn to infuse energy into your delivery. Vary the speed, the volume, and the pitch to emphasize key points. Effective pacing and pauses really help maintain engagement. It allows people time just to absorb your message. All right, you can practice everything from your pronunciation, your body language, like hand movements, facial expressions, to be more animated and expressive. You can look in the mirror if you want, but definitely you need to be speaking out loud when you're practicing. It is much different than reading something on paper. So read it out loud. You may be doing a lot of editing. It needs to sound natural when you're speaking. Okay, again, I mentioned eye contact. If you are close to a person, obviously you do want real eye contact, but if it's more of if you're on a stage and you're speaking to a room full of people, you can look around or look right above their heads. Finally, try not to roll your eyes or be dismissive if you get a very inappropriate or frustrating question. All right, so let's talk about written and printed materials. Over here on the left, that's my campaign sign that I use for the school board. You can see my name is large, and then I've got the pencil there. That's a quick graphic image to try to get their mind thinking about school, Plainfield School Board. And my tagline was a leader for all students, and that ALL is in all caps because my message was making sure that every student is served and valued in our schools. And then finally, in tiny font at the bottom of the sign is a disclaimer, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. All right, so the idea with our signs is people will likely be driving by, and so they're only going to be able to glance at it for a couple of seconds. So you want to have bold colors, consult somebody who knows what they're doing as far as font and colors that stick out. The person who did my signs thought the red was a better contrast with the green grass than the blue. We did both because those are the school colors. But my name is the first thing. If that's what they see and they see a pencil, hopefully they could connect that that was for school board. So you can get creative, but you just want that to be something you can glance at for a few seconds. Okay, try to find highly visible locations for your signs, high traffic areas, people who live at the front of a neighborhood, that would be great. All right, disclaimer is required by law. And in the next slide, I'm going to go into detail on that. I will just say, though, that campaign signs are expensive. That's probably one of the most expensive things you're going to spend your money on in your campaign. And if the disclaimer is not on there, your opponent or somebody from the town or county, they may catch that. And then you have to take your signs down and throw them away. So you don't want to waste the money on signs. I spent about $1,500 on signs for 150 signs. That's $10 a piece. You can find them for less, but I wanted to use a local company that is very involved in our community and give them the business, and then also hopefully get their buy-in for my campaign. So it's a big expense wherever you get your signs. Excuse me. Professional photos, you're going to want to get those done right away. You need a high resolution photo that's going to work well for digital images or possibly print. So get someone to take a professional looking photo of you. Campaign literature. Okay, you cannot put it in mailboxes. We are not allowed to tamper with the US mail, but you can attach it to the mailbox or a door handle. Business cards are another option. I did business cards. I thought they were great because they were much less expensive than flyers, easy to bring with you and easy to hand out. Okay, regardless of whether it's a full page or half page flyer or a business card, you're going to want to include your website and your email address. You might get t-shirts or buttons, car wraps or bumper stickers, and then finally print advertising in a newspaper. You could do, but it is very expensive. All right, so let's get into the disclaimer a little bit here. The disclaimer simply identifies who paid for that, whether it's a sign or a flyer. Sometimes you've probably seen the commercials for national campaigns, and they say, I am so-and-so and I approve this message. So the key is that you're going to either say you paid for it yourself. So I paid for all of mine. And I said, this was you've named your committee already, your campaign committee, when you filed and to run. And so I said it was the campaign paid for by the campaign to elect Margaret Wielenberg. If somebody else had paid for it, perhaps the teachers union, then I would need to say paid for by the teachers union, and I endorse this message. Okay, so there are very specific requirements about the font size. It's pretty small, but there's still a regulation there. There's other restrictions about when and where you can place your signs and much, much more. So I'm going to refer you to the online website here for the state of Indiana. You'll see that at the bottom there. There are also going to be possibly county or town requirements as well. So you need to check all of those, and they are constantly changing. So you're going to need to find the most recent guidelines for disclaimers and just make sure you comply with those. All right, let's move on. Okay, digital campaign. So you can have a website. You don't have to. As I mentioned, that was really helpful for me. I got all my materials. I gathered my photographs of myself volunteering in the schools when I did some substitute teaching, anything to show that you've been involved in the community, the things you want to highlight, your platform issues. You're going to discuss your views on them, what your plans are, whether you can highlight whether you are a candidate that's going to stick with the current way of doing things, or whether you are more of a disruptor that wants to change things. That's all up to you and your message, but you could put all that on your website. And then social media I used as well. That is going to vary as the campaign moves along. So my website really didn't change at all because I was not really technical. So I set it up and I just let it roll. You could, if you are a little more tech savvy, update your website, but I would recommend keeping that pretty much the same and then doing your updates with your social media. It can always refer back to your website. Okay, now videos you probably know are going to get a lot more views and engagement on both platforms, your website and your social media. And if you use an app like Neighborhood, there are others that target your message to a very specific geographic area. And that's what we want to do here. The area of people who are going to be voting for you, that's where we want the message to go. Okay, finally, you have to get out there in real life too. And so using a digital campaign and an in-person campaign work really, really well together. So for example, you say you have a big campaign event coming up on the weekend. So all during the week, you're going to be using your social media to promote your event. Then you have your event, you're speaking directly with potential voters. You want to get some photographs while you're there, ask someone to be taking pictures of your event, and try to get, speaking of taking pictures, try to get a photo of engagement of the candidate speaking with a member of the public. You want to kind of really zoom in on, and frame your photo on the candidate speaking with someone, if possible, really engaging with the community. Be careful here, a word on having photos of children, because I was running for school board. I had a lot of adorable photos that I could not use because I did not want to put children's faces out there in public. So I used some of them. If I was going to use it, I put a sticker over their face. Or I tried to get like the backs of children. As long as you cannot identify a child, it's okay, but just be sensitive to that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, social media. So we're going to try to draft regular posts that are consistent with our core message, but vary over the time frame of the campaign to highlight your events, any media coverage, or anything that comes up. We would like to anticipate and create the posts in advance, if possible. If you can create a series of posts, that possibly is something you could use AI for, but you decide. If you can create those, then you can use a service like Later to help schedule those and get those all scheduled out. Now, of course, if something comes up, you'll just make a new one that is more contemporaneous with what is happening at the moment. All right, all of the posts should build the case for your election with cumulative information, consistent posts that all lead up to the result that you are the best person and they need to get out and vote for you. You'd like to emphasize ties to the community, your values, priorities, and qualifications. You want to grab attention from viewers and the algorithms by using at least some videos. And again, I know it's hard to make a video. You may not be comfortable, but with practice, you can get better at it. So if you could try to get a couple of videos, that would be really helpful. And get creative, especially if you are a creative person, you have a great team to help you with some videos. For example, Joe Mackey did this in his campaign. He went to a sidewalk that was crumbling and he stood on the sidewalk and told the voters how he would be repairing the sidewalks and the infrastructure in his district. He showed the potholes and the crumbling sidewalks. That is really effective because they're going to see you out in their neighborhoods and that you understand what is important to them. So if you have any issue like that, where you could go right to the problem or the issue, perhaps I didn't do this in front of a school, but perhaps you could be standing in front of a school talking about the playground equipment, whatever is relevant. Okay. You can also target very specific voter demographics with tailored messages. You could elicit endorsements or testimonials from local influencers, VIPs, or organizations. And I did ask people in the community that are well known to give me a little endorsement, just a couple sentences about why they think I would be a good candidate. And I think that's helpful. Always ask someone to proofread your content before posting it. If we are reading our own content, our eyes are going to go right past that typo. So please have someone proofread for you. And then finally, link the candidate's website and fundraising vehicle to your social media. Next slide. All right, canvassing. That simply means getting out in person and talking to actual human beings. So it is a systematic initiation of direct contact with individuals. And this is going to enable you to connect with a voter on a personal level. It can include knocking on doors, making phone calls, going to a public place, just like a coffee shop, somewhere where potential voters could be. We have a fall festival, and I was out there with Halloween candy and I had used Smarties because it was education and tying it to the school board, but giving candy out to the kids and business cards to the adults. And then speaking, obviously, with people, if they engaged at all and had questions, I was ready with my elevator pitch and escalator pitch. All right. When you're canvassing or speaking with voters, you'd like to address their concerns. So ask them, what are you concerned about? What is bothering you? What's keeping you up at night? What would you like to see change? Be prepared, hopefully, that you can answer their questions with empathy, knowledge, and confidence. The goal is to leave a positive impression, and ultimately, you want to gain votes. Phone banking is another way to reach out to people, or texting, actual phone calls or texts. While you're doing all of this, whether it's in person or via phone or text, you want to build your list of anyone that indicates they might be willing to volunteer or donate or help your campaign in any way. Make sure you can get in touch with them. Okay, canvassing is very hard work, but it can be really, really effective in local races. So you just want to be considerate of people's time. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide here. So never start before 9 a.m. and make sure you stop at a reasonable time in the evening. All right, so another way to reach out is to engage with community organizations and grassroots organizations. By partnering with them, you can reach a much wider audience, enhance your visibility and your opportunities, and build relationships with community leaders. This is a great way to foster trust and support. So you know what the organizations are that are really big in your area. Some that are popular in my town are the Chamber of Commerce, Rotary, Kiwanis, and some faith-based organizations. So reach out to them, start going to meetings, ask if you could possibly speak at a meeting. Some will and some will not want to have candidates. That is perfectly fine. You can still go to the meetings and get to know people. I also attended local events, as I mentioned, the town parade and fall festival. Football games were huge for me because it was the parents and the school community, but whatever, farmers markets, fairs, parades, whatever is big in your community. All right, next slide. Okay, so you can create your own events. On the previous slide, we were piggybacking on events that were already going on, but you can create your very own events. The benefit of that is you're going to be engaging with a friendly audience. So I had a campaign kickoff party in my next door neighbor's backyard, and we invited everybody that we thought could possibly be a friendly supporter. And we got someone to play guitar, a little live music, and some appetizers and beverages, and just a very casual, nice evening. If you're campaigning in the fall, hopefully you have some nice weather, but do what works for you. So I had my campaign kickoff party, and most of the people there were already supporting me. So that was a great chance to practice my elevator pitch, my escalator pitch. I took the mic for a minute from the guitar guy and spoke to the audience, of course, thanked them for coming, and just kind of went through my platform issues. So it's a great way to practice and get people to help get involved with your campaign. Okay, so examples, meet and greets in public places. I already mentioned the coffee shop. Trick-or-treating, I went to some trunk-or-treat events at churches and other places, and I put a business card on a candy bar and handed that out. So get creative. Think about what is relevant to you, your office, and your community. You could have house parties or neighborhood parties. It might be a more formal debate or candidate forum or a roundtable discussion with various groups. All right, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So the pro tip there just says if you have a booth, try not to sit behind the booth, but get out in front of it so you can speak face to face with the voters. Again, we're really just trying to communicate to them that we're just like them. We understand their issues and we would like to not be sitting behind a desk or a table. All right. So the house parties, a little way to organize this, a word on that, is you could use this idea of a neighborhood captain. So what you would do, divide your town or your voting area into sections, like a wheel and spokes. Then once you have your sections, you try to find a neighborhood captain in each section who would be willing to have a little event. And these can be very, very casual. So I mentioned my neighbor's backyard. It could be on the driveway. It could be in their home, whatever they're comfortable with. But you're trying to find people in all the different sections of your town to host something. They're going to invite their friends and neighbors. And then it's a systematic way of trying to cover the whole town in a relaxed atmosphere. People are much more likely to talk to you when you're sitting around in a lawn chair or just standing on the driveway. Okay, so that sets the tone for a casual, low stress event. Again, you don't have to have fancy food or anything. Plan to have some literature with you, whether that's a business card or flyers. That information should contain your website and email address. Hopefully you can invite them to additional parties or identify someone there who may be willing to host a party of their own. You might get volunteers, donations, and ultimately votes. Okay, so finally, we're just going to ask someone to take a picture of the event and seeking permission. I talked about this. If an adult is at a public event, legally, you don't have to get their permission to post it. Sometimes it might just be a courtesy, but be careful with children present. Okay, next slide. All right, media relations. You may or may not have this component of your campaign, depending on how big or small your campaign is or your budget. I did not ever do a press release, but if you wanted to, just know that they do follow a very specific format. And I've got that listed there. It starts with the headline, the date line, the city and the date, lead paragraph, the body, some quotes, and the contact information. So if you are going to think about doing a press release, it needs to be newsworthy to capture the attention of journalists. You may include some subheadings that's going to be more detailed than that basic thing up front there. And it follows the inverted pyramid style. So the very most important information is up front and at the top. As it goes down, it gets into some of the background details. Okay, now this is what I did take advantage of. Some publications will ask you for an interview and publish them for free. So our county paper reached out to all the candidates running for office, whether that was school board, city, county, or otherwise. And you could meet with the reporter at a coffee shop and give an interview. So if you're going to do that, again, you've got to do your homework. So I went to the local library in the local history room and pulled all the previous copies from that county newspaper and looked at their candidate, election guides that they had done before. So I could see the type of questions they asked, get really familiar with those, prepare your answers, but also know that they are going to change it up somewhat. So it's not going to be question for question, what they asked before. There may be timely questions or just different questions, but it's a great place to start. Okay, so it's a good idea also to follow coverage of your opponent and other candidates in the district. You can learn from them. You may respond to something, but you just want to be aware of what, and you can really, I learned from watching other candidates go to different events and speak, and I kind of decided which style I liked the best and modeled my message after other candidates who I thought did a great job and resonated with me. Okay, finally, you're going to conduct mock interviews with your team to be prepared with your substantive answers. Next slide, please. All right, now I hope you don't have a crisis. However, something may pop up that is unexpected. So don't panic. Work with your team. You ahead of time, if you could anticipate potential hot topics or controversial issues that you just think are going to come up, you really need to prepare ahead of time, thinking about what people may ask, or attack you on and how you're going to respond. But despite your best efforts, something unexpected may come up. So stay calm, contact your trusted advisors, and develop a response. In this case, less is more. So you're going to want to have a short statement that's truthful, that addresses whatever the issue is, but we don't want to get into the weeds here. Address it and then try to move on. So I will give you a personal story here. During my campaign, I had my signs that I mentioned, and I also had some very large banners. It was the same image as the sign, but a couple of big banners. And I wanted to have those on really high traffic intersections. So I have a friend in the community who has a backyard that backs right up to a really busy street. And so I asked her if I could put my banner there, and she said, sure. So I got the banner up, and then the next thing I knew, somebody in town who had an issue with the homeowner, the friend of mine where I had placed the banner, he started going on social media and our town chatter pages on Facebook and disparaging me because of my banner being in this person's yard. So he did not like her, and she had been involved in a town issue where she opposed placement of services for homeless people. And he was a proponent of that homeless shelter. It was located in a neighborhood. She didn't want that in the neighborhood, and he did. And it was a big dispute in our town. So she got some enemies and some people who were very unhappy with her because of that one issue. In my naivete, I did not think that people would know that was her house. Well, I found out very quickly. A lot of people knew that was her house, and they did not care for her for that issue, for the position she took. So then I have this guy who attacking me left and right and saying, don't vote for her because she's affiliated with her. Long story short, I immediately reached out to him and I said, hey, let's get together to talk about this. Initially, he was hesitant, but I convinced him. We talked for 2 hours over coffee, and I explained that I did not share her opinion on that issue and that I was a completely separate person. So he, fortunately for me, recanted and went back online and changed his opinion and encouraged and said that he'd made a mistake and was speaking about me without ever having met me. So that turned out well. But if you have one person, if it's something like that, you can clear up, immediately contact them. If it's a bigger issue that's just something that has happened factually that you can't dispute, again, you're going to try to make a brief statement and then move on. If you are going to be posting on your social media like Facebook or other platforms, you're going to want to turn the comments off. You do not want people making all kinds of comments. And a word about that with social media is you can decide whether to leave the comments on or turn them off, but you need to be consistent. And so you don't want to censor comments that are critical of your viewpoint. Only something that's completely inappropriate and should not be on there. You can delete those or turn off the comments, but we need to, sometimes we're going to hear people don't agree with our view, and that's just part of it. Okay. Okay, the last point on this, and we'll go to the next slide, is just make sure within your campaign team, you have clear lines of communication of who is going to be responding. If there was anything like that, like you have, a crisis or something, the only person that really should be speaking for you is yourself, the candidate, or your communications director. You don't want some volunteer, some friend of a friend, cousin's neighbor speaking for you. So just be really clear with your team about what you want them to communicate. And especially in a crisis, they should refer any question to you, especially the media. Refer any media questions to the candidate themselves. All right, so we've made it to the final tips and takeaways. So you're going to want to hone your public image by communicating your values, integrity, and commitment to public service. At the same time, try to relax, be authentic, showcase your unique personality, and try to enjoy the process. Some parts of it are very enjoyable, meeting new people, finding like-minded individuals, and really expanding your social circle to people that you enjoy, that you've met. It can be really rewarding. So just try to be yourself. And when the times get tough and when you're tired and you have somebody attacking you, remember your why. Why did you want to run for this office? I know you have a reason and probably very passionate about the issues or wanting to serve your community. So go back to your why. All right, teamwork makes the dream work. You've got to have a really solid team, even if it's one or two other people. If you have more, that's fantastic. I already mentioned the two ladies that were my go-tos. Without them, I could not have done it. So they were amazing. If you can get a couple of really strong people who are invested in you and your campaign, that will make your life much better. So build that strong team and express your gratitude to them early and often. Preparation and practice, practice, practice. I cannot stress enough. You will get better and you'll fine tune your message with practice. Also, seek balance in your life. Know when you need a break. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. So you don't want to burn out too early. And also, not everyone will like you. As you could tell from my story, you're going to have some detractors, and that is okay. It really is part of the process. It's usually not personal. It's just they're in an opposite party or they have a different position. Hopefully, they're keeping it to the issues, but just know this is part of it and be prepared for some rejection, then move on. So this here, I'm going to end with the phrase that came from my teammate who helped prepare these slides, Joe Mackey. He says to be forthright, gracious, and magnanimous. And I had to Google the definition of magnanimous. That means generous, forgiving, and unselfish. So we just want to be our best selves. We want to project an image that's going to have broad appeal. I was going to mention this earlier, but I forgot. So when you are creating your image and your personal brand, this is a time where you want to think about reaching out to a broad range of people. So if you have a more eccentric way of dressing and speaking, you want to be yourself, but also just remember that maybe this is the time to try to be a little more mainstream. I think you know what I mean. Just we want to appear professional, and hopefully we can get people from another party to vote for us as well. So at this time, I will go to the last slide here. And thank you very much for your time, for listening, and wish you the best of luck. And I do want to mention the contributors here. I've mentioned Joseph Mackey and also Kathy Gross was a great contributor to this slide and this performance. Thank you. Okay, questions?
First, let me thank Margaret for a great presentation. Really, I felt like a very informative one. We do have questions. The first question, and you're a great person to answer this question. How would you advise school board candidates now being asked to run as a Democrat or Republican?
Okay, that is a very relevant question. I think it's up to you. So I have thought about this. If I run again, I will probably do the nonpartisan. However, if I am directly asked, aren't you a Democrat? I'm going to say, yes, I am. However, I am not acting in a partisan fashion. Just like the last time I ran for school board as a nonpartisan, I'm still a nonpartisan. Yes, I am a Democrat, but I'm going to be always acting in the best interest of the students. Always not a Republican or a Democrat, but in the best interest of the students. But the reason I'm going to check the box for nonpartisan is because there will be some people who show up to the polls and have no idea who you are. They don't know anything about you. Seeing the Democrat, sign there, that might be enough for them to not vote for you. So I'm hoping that by being a nonpartisan, I could still capture some votes for that. But I'm going to be honest. And again, I don't think we should be, people know I'm involved with the Democratic Party. I'm not going to lie about that. So it is ultimately up to you. You could declare yourself as a Democrat, but you may get more votes being nonpartisan.
I will say, because I was on school board from 2021 to this end of the end of 24. It shouldn't be a partisan office. It absolutely shouldn't. And we as a party argued all throughout the process that it shouldn't be a partisan office. So as a district chair, I think that a Democrat who says, I said this shouldn't be a partisan office, I'm not going to put my name down as Democrat. I think that's intellectually consistent, and so we should be okay with that. We really should. Um, Another question about team building. Of course, seasoned campaign managers are the gold standard, but grassroots campaigns rarely have the money to support that. What is your advice for a campaign manager that is brand new to the trail? First, I would say we do have the campaign manager training available on YouTube at In4Blue Pod. I'll let Margaret answer.
Okay. It depends, obviously, it depends on the level of office you're running for, but as a school board candidate, my two right-hand ladies had never run a campaign either. And I feel like we did a pretty good job. So I don't think you have to have an experienced campaign manager. Mine were completely volunteer, 100%. But they are smart women who, one was an attorney and had been a communications director in corporate America. So if you can find people who have experience, it does not have to be campaign experience per se. I would just try to do the best you can and find people who are committed to helping you.
I'm going to add in on that. Teresa Brandon, who has organized all of these training sessions, really had no experience in politics before she was Joe Mackey's campaign manager in 2020. Um, that wasn't a hindrance because Teresa is exceptionally well organized. And so if you're going to be a first time campaign manager or you're a candidate who's going to have a first time um, campaign manager, none of this is, you don't have to be a genius to do this. Plenty of stupid people get very far in politics. Plenty of them. If you don't believe me, look up Louis Gohmert, congressman from Texas. The man was stunningly uneducated and uncurious about the world. Um, Common sense will get you really far in life. So when you're looking for a campaign manager or you're considering whether or not you should be a campaign manager, are you organized? Are you able to think through all the steps in a process? And do they have good common sense? That will get you really far. Yes, the cat is Fuzz. He is very persistent. Any other questions? Uh, Drew Cox asked, I'm running for congressional district and I may need to switch to a different treasurer. Can that person live far away from me? Well, Drew, that's actually a great segue to our training coming up on Wednesday. We're going to do campaign treasurer training with Tim Anderson, who's an experienced treasurer, as well as being a CPA. So he is probably going to be the guy to answer that. So I would stay tuned for Wednesday. And does anyone else have any questions? Because otherwise, I want to again thank Margaret for her time this evening. Um, and Keith for his help throughout. And thank you all for being here. All right, bye. Goodbye, everyone. Have a good night.